Hey everybody, and welcome back to another Max Velocity weather forecast. And in today's forecast, we'll be breaking down a huge storm that is coming to the United States early next week, and this storm is going to bring several problems, and that includes the threat of severe weather. That includes damaging winds, large hail, and even a few tornadoes to areas like the Great Plains, the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and even down into the Southeast United States. In addition to this, we'll be watching for the threat of a winter storm across parts of the upper Midwest and eventually into the Northeast as we go into early next week with the same exact storm. I'll be giving you the latest breakdown on everything that you need to know in this forecast, and let's begin with what's happening right now in the United States today. And we will begin with the East Coast, and this is an area that has been very active over the last 24 hours. We actually have a new low pressure system that developed back over on the east coast of the country near the mid-Atlantic region, and this is actually bringing lots of rainfall anywhere from the Northeast back into areas like Florida. And as this system starts to slowly drift offshore, weather conditions will begin to improve and much more sunshine will be in the forecast, because notice behind this system there's really hardly any clouds across the Midwest and back through the Dixie Alley. So I do think it's gonna be a much nicer weekend, especially across the east coast of the United States. Back over in the Great Plains right now, it's very dry, very sunny for many areas, perfect weather, get outdoors. It's really perfect weather all across the Great Plains. The only exception to this though is actually back up in the northern plains in the upper Midwest. Notice on the infrared imagery that white area there, it's very hard to see, but that's actually snow that is still on the ground, and it's still very cold up there. So obviously those areas not really going to have great weather to be outside unless you have really a lot of layers on, because it's still pretty chilly up there. And then our last storm that we're going to be talking about a little bit in this forecast is the one that is just west of Washington. You might be wondering, why is this a big deal? Well, this is actually going to bring a storm across the Rocky Mountains and eventually into the Midwest as we go into Friday and Saturday. That'll also bring some showers and even some snow showers to areas like the Midwest and perhaps even the Northeast. We will be talking about that here in just a moment. All right, let's talk more about the weather pattern that'll be impacting the United States over the next several days. And to look at that, we are going to look at the jet stream. This gives us an idea of the weather patterns that are happening across the United States. And right now we do have that large low pressure system still back up in Canada, though it has weakened substantially since what we saw that severe weather event back earlier this week. It is still here. I mean, it's still in effect right now. It's back up north of Michigan, not really bringing any impacts to the country as it has been weakening quite a bit. But one thing to keep in mind is that the jet stream is still very strong. So if you are traveling by plane, there will be some turbulence, especially from New Hampshire and anywhere in New England, really, all the way back through the southeast. Once we go into Friday and a Saturday, though, things start to dry out quite a bit for most of the country. So if you're not already dry on the East Coast, you will be drying out this weekend. By the time we go into Sunday, we'll be watching for a large storm back over in California to quickly develop, and it'll eventually go over the Rocky Mountains as we go into late Sunday into Monday, and this is going to be our next big storm. And this is the storm that I referenced at the very beginning of this forecast, because this will be our next large storm. It's going to bring multiple problems. Here's that low pressure system. It's going to be associated in areas near the Four Corners states as we go into late Monday night. That'll allow for some severe weather across areas in the southern plains, the central plains, and even back into areas like the Midwest. And then once we go into Tuesday, that threat of severe weather will start to shift closer to areas like the Ohio Valley, back into the Dixie Alley, with a very strong, by the way, southwesterly flow in the jet stream. This will help to basically organize supercells in this particular area, anywhere from the southern plains back through the Ohio Valley. By the time we go into Wednesday into Thursday, this moves out. We'll still have some showers and storms perhaps down in the southeast as we go later into the week, and eventually by the weekend I do think we're going to still stay fairly active. And I think overall the first 2 weeks of April will be very active. I think we're going to have multiple storm systems, and the European model is actually showing that here, even as we go into next Saturday, closer to the solar eclipse, by the way, which I will have a detailed forecast on what I think the solar eclipse weather forecast will be in probably a couple of days, since there is still some uncertainty in terms of how much cloud cover there will be. No consistency right now with the computer models in terms of how much cloud cover there will be in any part of the country. So we'll save that for our next forecast. Just make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Now let's talk more about that severe weather potential across the Northeast as we go into next week. We will begin with Monday, which the Storm Prediction Center has already issued a slight risk of severe weather. This includes areas from the Ohio Valley and the lower Midwest back into the southern plains. With that being said, I wouldn't even rule out a severe weather day on Sunday, which is the day before Monday. So going into the day 4 outlook, wouldn't rule out a conditional risk for severe weather back over in areas like the central and southern plains. With that being said, that's a bit more of a conditional risk. It may or may not happen. What's going to be a bit more concerning though about Monday is that we're talking about quite a large area here. This goes from the Ohio Valley and the Midwest all the way back into the southern plains, and all modes of severe weather will be in the forecast, including damaging winds, which will likely be our primary threat, and some large hail and perhaps even a few tornadoes. Once we go into Tuesday, which is tossing trampolines on Tacos Tuesday, we do have a slight risk of severe weather already. This is, by the way, the day 6 outlook, so we're looking quite a ways ahead here. For the Ohio Valley and back through areas in the Dixie Alley, that slight risk of severe weather is in that region, so from Ohio back into like northern Alabama. Main concern here will likely be damaging winds, and I would not rule out a couple of large hailstorms and perhaps even a few tornadoes again as we go into Tuesday. But I do think the worst day out of any day that we're talking about severe weather next week will likely be Monday, and there will be a chance of severe weather anytime from Sunday, which again is a conditional risk, all the way through Wednesday, which as of right now, the confidence on a severe weather event on Wednesday does remain low at this time, but it is a possibility. Now let's go into the future cast and give you a day-by-day outlook in terms of when we'll see severe weather and where we will be seeing severe weather, in addition to a little discussion about that potential for a winter storm early next week. Look at this though, as we go later into today into tomorrow, that rain over on the East Coast is going to be moving out. So for those that are wondering, when are we done with rain? It should be out of here no later than tomorrow afternoon, unless you are in eastern New England. Once we go into late Friday into early Saturday, there will be some showers and perhaps even a few thunderstorms across the Midwest. As of now, there is not a risk of severe weather. It should be a very low risk. If we end up getting a risk of severe weather, I think overall we're not going to see anything. I just don't think the ingredients will really be there. I think we're not going to have enough moisture up there as we go into Saturday afternoon and evening. But also something to watch for will be the snow potential across the upper Midwest and even the northern Great Lakes region. Keep that in mind. A few inches of snow possible in both northern Wisconsin and even northern Michigan. Once we go into Sunday, a new low pressure system will start to intensify as it crosses over the Rocky Mountains. This is what we're going to have to watch for Sunday afternoon and evening. We will have a few showers and thunderstorms across the Ohio Valley. I don't expect much severe weather there. At least a very low threat is possible, but other than that, I just don't think we're going to have anything there. A conditional risk of severe weather will exist Sunday evening across areas from the Central Plains back into the Southern Plains, so West Texas, Western Oklahoma, and perhaps even central and western parts of Kansas. There will be a conditional risk of severe weather here. It's going to depend on the trough timing, if we have enough moisture, and if that cap erodes across these areas, which remains very uncertain at this time, but keep that in mind. It is something we'll have to watch for. Once we go into Monday, we'll eventually have that low pressure system moving further to the east. This will allow for a more significant severe weather event to start to materialize anywhere from Texas back into the Midwest. Areas just south of Chicago is where I'm looking at for that threat of severe weather to really cut off in the Midwest. So if you're just south there of Chicago, be mindful of that as we go into Monday afternoon and evening. Eventually, as we go late Monday night into Tuesday morning, showers and thunderstorms will be rumbling across areas from North Texas back into Missouri. Eventually, as we go into Tuesday, we'll watch for another threat of severe weather to develop. This will be the area to watch for as we go into Tuesday afternoon, anywhere from southern Ohio, even as far south as the lower Mississippi River area, which will also be an area to watch for, even though you're not in the risk of severe weather right now. Eventually, as we go into Wednesday, we'll need to watch for this system to start to bring the potential for a winter storm. The winter storm threat in the Midwest is definitely starting to go down. Obviously, it was something we were mentioning a couple of times. I don't think we're going to see much there at this point. I do think there's a better shot, though, if you're in the Northeast in New England, there could be a winter storm out of this disturbance. And once we go into late next week, so eventually by Saturday, there will be probably a few more storms that impact the country, but exactly what those do still remain very uncertain, since we're still talking about an event that is well over 7 days out. Here's the instability, which is basically the fuel for severe storms as we go into Sunday. Notice there will be some instability in the southern plains. Exactly how much instability there is, though, for that potential conditional risk of severe weather still remains pretty uncertain at this time. But once we go into Monday afternoon, a little bit more instability will be available from the Midwest back into the southern plains. So just keep that in mind. They're more fuel basically for severe storms, which again, I think Monday will be the greatest chance of severe weather. And even on Tuesday, we'll have plenty of instability from Ohio back into the lower Mississippi Valley. So those areas will have to be on alert. And by Wednesday, a conditional low risk of severe weather may exist from North Carolina back through Florida. And one more note about the severe weather setup going into Monday, the low-level jet will be cranking out of the southwest. This creates a southwesterly flow. This will help to rotate supercells in the lower levels. We'll really have to watch areas in the southern and central plains and even back into the lower Midwest, because that low-level jet will be cranking. At times, it could be as strong as 60 to 70 knots, which means there will likely be some pretty strong rotation, at least in the lower levels. Now, that does not mean we're going to see several tornadoes or a tornado outbreak, but it is something we need to monitor, because depending on the storm mode, basically, if we have a lot of discrete supercells, this will definitely help to increase increase the tornado risk. If it's more of a linear setup though, which would be more of a damaging wind concern, the tornado risk would definitely still be there, but it would be on the lower side of things. So this will be something to watch for very closely as we go into early next week. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel. We'll be keeping you posted with the latest as we get closer to this event, and we might even go live for these days, so make sure you have the bell icon clicked down below so you're notified if and when we do go live.